So we did many of the topics of Shabbat already, Baruch Hashem. We covered cooking and borer and other many important halachot. We did in the past kiddush and havdalah. And I thought of learning today Siman Shin Lamed Vav 336. Shin Lamed Vav. Maybe we don't meet it every week, but it does give us quite a few foundations for halachot of Shabbat. The topic is using plants on Shabbat, or walking on plants on Shabbat, climbing on a tree on Shabbat. Now, I think that most of us have passed the age of climbing on a tree on Shabbat. Probably. Maybe do it every now and then for the fun, with the kids or grandchildren. But we still learn from here quite a few important halachot. And we'll start from the maybe practical, the more detailed halachot, detailed halachot. And as we go on, we will see quite a few, maybe I'll say foundations for halachot of Shabbat. Okay, so that's our goal for today. And the Shulchan Aruch starts with the halacha that you don't climb a tree on Shabbat. Doesn't matter if it's still nice, light, green, or if it's already dry. And you also don't hang up on it. If you want to do pull-ups, you can't do it on a tree on Shabbat. You don't even use anything which is connected, any tree which is connected to the ground. You don't lean a ladder on it. If you have a palm tree on Shabbat and you have your ladder, you want to move it from place to place, you can't lean your ladder on Shabbat. We'll see soon about touching it, but you don't do it on Shabbat. And the reason is because maybe you climb the tree and pick leaves or pick fruit on Shabbat. So this is a maybe very small halacha, but you can see already from here an interesting rule or foundation for Shabbat. Shabbat is so important, and we meet it every week. It's so different from the rest of the days that Chazal said, if we don't do here something which is here, if we don't do here something which is noticeable, by accident we will view Shabbat or we'll do things on Shabbat that we usually do on a regular day. On a regular day, you walk next to your tree and you see a leaf you don't want, so you just pick it. Or if you see a nice apple on a tree, if you have an apple tree, so you pick it and say, hey, so you'll see a flower, you'll see, smell the leaves. But even without thinking about it, you'll do the action and then you'll say, oops, it's Shabbat. Since we are so used to doing those things on the regular day, Chazal said, let's take a distance. Let's take a step back, and we won't do those things on Shabbat. We won't use a tree at all on Shabbat. We won't climb up on a tree on Shabbat. We won't lean a ladder on Shabbat, because that might cause us to pick something from Shabbat. Okay, so that's we can call maybe a foundation halacha.
Isn't this the same reason for not riding a horse?
That's exactly right. It's the same reason for riding a horse on Shabbat. And on the olden days, everyone used to ride horses. And it's so natural. You ride a horse and you see a tree and you just go from a tree and pick a leaf from a tree and start using to hit your animal on Shabbat, to move it from place to place. Chazal said, one of the Gemara brings a story of someone said, I'll ride a horse on Shabbat and you will see, nothing will happen. I'll be careful not to pick anything from a tree. So he rode on the horse on Shabbat, and even without noticing, he just picked a branch and hit his horse. So that's not using a tree on Shabbat. We'll get to the question soon. Can we, if we have a hammock, we have a hammock on a tree, can we go not on Shabbat? If we have a swing attached to a tree, can we go not on Shabbat? And so on. So that's questions which we will meet very, very soon. And maybe another question which we'll meet very soon, and that I think maybe we meet it more often. If you go around the neighborhood, you can see plants that have a great smell. They have a great smell, honeysuckles and jasmines, and they have a great smell. They are allowed to smell a flower on Shabbat. And is there a difference between flowers And etrog, hey, someone here has an etrog tree in the neighborhood. Can you go to an etrog, as we know, has a good smell? Can you go to the etrog and smell the etrog on Shabbat? Or maybe it's a problem. So that's questions we'll get to very soon. Chazal even extended this decree of not using a tree on Shabbat, and I said if a person climbed on a tree, he shouldn't get off. If a person climbed on a tree, he shouldn't get off. And the reason is to make sure a person doesn't climb on a tree. Okay, and so let's go into it. We won't go into the details of it, just to get the idea of it. And the Shulchan Aruch says if someone climbed up on a tree on Shabbat, say if he climbed by mistake, he should get off the tree. But if he climbed up on purpose, he knew it's Shabbat, and he knew he's not supposed to climb on a tree on Shabbat. Chazal said you climbed on a tree on Shabbat, knowing it's a problem, you should stay on the tree the whole Shabbat. Okay, that's for a person climbing on the tree. What happens if a person places something on the tree? Or we'll have a very practical question. Many times you'll see kids playing soccer in the park, and they kick the ball, and the ball goes into a tree and gets stuck on a tree. Can you take the ball off the tree on Shabbat? What do you think?
No.
No, you can't take the ball off the tree on Shabbat. The question will be, should you tell the kids they can't do it? That's a question. Maybe we'll discuss it in a moment. But Chazal said, if you place something on a tree on Shabbat or before Shabbat, you shouldn't take it off on Shabbat. Chazal didn't want us to use the trees at all. Therefore, they said, if you place something on a tree, don't take it off on Shabbat. It seems obvious that if a ball flew on a tree on Shabbat or before Shabbat, so you shouldn't take it off, right? You shouldn't take it off. You shouldn't take it off. Even more so, usually we're trying to take off the ball. How do the kids take off a ball? They start throwing things at the ball. And then most chances they will cut leaves, make branches fall. That's certainly a problem to take it off on Shabbat. The question is, should we tell the kids or we don't need to tell them? And I think the answer is that if we know the kids will listen to us, tell them not to take off the ball on Shabbat. Tell them to take it after Shabbat. Some kids, when they see a ball, their ball, for them, their ball, that's the whole life. I think we were once that age, and we can probably relate to it, right? We saw a ball, we want to get the ball, and even if we tell us it's a sur on Shabbat, maybe some kids will still do it on Shabbat. In such a case, when it's not our kids, and we don't have any obligation to educate them, and they're still kids, they aren't bar mitzvah, so just sometimes it's better just not to tell them anything. But if it's our son or our daughter and we know that they'll listen to us, so we should tell them not to do it on Shabbat. Okay, so we finished Seif Aleph. We said that we can't use a tree on Shabbat. For that, we have a few exceptions. One of them is that we have roots coming out from the tree, and they're so close to the ground, they're less than 3 tfachim, about 24 centimeters. And the soil underneath them are considered like as if part of the ground. Okay, so it's not such a common halacha, but we do see that idea in other places, that anything which is in 3 tfachim to the ground is considered part of the ground. Okay, we have maybe an example for it from Sukkot. Okay, Sukkot is maybe more connected to Lavud, but if we have the wall of the sukkah, there's a bit of a gap, a space between the floor and the wall of the sukkah. If it's less than 24 centimeters, 3 tfachim, that's fine. Okay, so that's the general rule we see from here, that anything which is in 3 tfachim, 24 centimeters to the ground, so you can, it's considered part of the ground, and therefore you can sit on that on Shabbat. Okay, I just get myself more water. So we said that you can't climb on a tree on Shabbat. In Saif Gimel, the Shulchan Aruch says that this decree of Chazal not to climb on a tree on Shabbat, not to use a tree on Shabbat, it's only a tree. But something which is so soft, like grass, for example, you can use on Shabbat. Or in other words, you're allowed to walk on grass on Shabbat. The reason is, I think it's just the practical life, right? If you climb up on a tree, a person might start picking things. But walking on the weeds, we walk on the weeds, some of us, every day, all the time, and we never pick things from us. So Chazal said, look, we aren't trying to prevent you from living your life. We're trying to prevent you from doing things on Shabbat you aren't supposed to do. So if people usually walk on leaves, on grass, on weeds, and nothing happens, they can do it also on Shabbat. Says the Shulchan Aruch, you're allowed to walk on weeds on Shabbat, even if it doesn't matter if they're still green, if they are dry already, like in Ma'ale Adumim, I think now everything is dry, so you can walk on it on Shabbat, because you aren't planning, you don't have any intention to pick the weeds on Shabbat. And this is a very important sentence. כיוון שאינו מתכוון לתלוש, because he doesn't have any intention to pick the weeds on Shabbat. And it's a very important sentence. And let's ask a question like that. I walked in the grass. Okay, I went to the park, I walked in the grass, and even sometimes maybe I walked barefoot, and by mistake, I picked a few weeds. Okay, by walking, by mistake, I picked a few weeds. Is that a problem? Can I walk in the weeds, if I know that there's a chance that I'll be picking the weeds? Okay, let's say my garden has long weeds. Okay, it has long weeds. Many times during the winter, towards the end of the winter, our backyard, where the building where we live, so has long weeds. Can you walk there on Shabbat? When you know there is a chance that you will pick some of the weeds while walking. And here we have a very important rule of Shabbat, the concept of Eino Mitkaven. Or if you want to be Yeshivish, Eino Miskaven. Eino Miskaven. Eino Mitkaven, something which is done without intention. Okay, so when we have something which is done without intention, that's the first criteria. And the second criteria is we aren't sure it will happen. Okay, it might happen, it might not happen. That's the chance. Okay, so when we have two conditions, one is that we aren't sure if it will happen, and the second, even if it will happen, our intention is not for that to happen, you can do it on Shabbat. And an example, if I walk on the grass on Shabbat, there's a chance that I'll be picking grass, and there's a chance that I will not be picking grass. Okay? I don't know. It might be 50-50, it might be 80%, 20%, but there's a chance that it will happen. There's a chance it won't happen. And even if when I run and walk on the grass on Shabbat, I don't have any intention. My kavanah, my intention is not to pick any leaves. Therefore, I can walk on grass on Shabbat. Okay, so from here, we really learn a very important concept of Shabbat. That's why I wanted to learn this topic, because we can see here the idea of Eino Mitkaven, something which is done without any intention, and something might happen, something might not happen. Okay, that's a concept for that. I'll give you another place where we see this idea of Eino Mitkaven. You meet it all the time. You open your fridge. You have a refrigerator. We live in the 21st century. I'm sure all of us have refrigerators on Shabbat. And not like 100 years ago, our refrigerators aren't built of ice blocks that we went and got from the river, the Tennessee River, or Mississippi River, whatever big river you had next to your house. I don't think the Jordan River or the one next to Ma'ale Adumim has any ice in it. But that's how they had fridges at the time. So obviously then there's no problem. But fridges today have an engine in it. Can you open the fridge on Shabbat? And you know that there's a chance that that opening the fridge will cause the engine to turn on Shabbat. Okay, so that's a question. If it's 100% that the engine will start turning on because of you open the fridge and right away, that might be a problem. Won't go now into drama, that might be a problem. But if there's a chance it will turn on, there's a chance it won't turn on, depending on the fridge, depending on the temperature, depending on how long you keep the fridge open, depending on so many things, you don't know if the engine will turn on or it won't turn on. And your intention when you open the fridge, I'm sure none of us open the fridge and say, I'm now planning to turn on the engine of the fridge. No, I'm planning to get a piece of yogurt. I want to get some ice cream from the freezer. Or if you're the healthy guys, I'm trying to get a piece of cucumber and lettuce, right? None of us are planning to turn on the engine. So that's called Eino Mitkaven. Okay, my intention isn't to do something on Shabbat, and it's not, we aren't sure it will happen. Even that's called Eino Mitkaven, and it is permitted. Okay, so that's, we should know. The other side of Eino Mitkaven, we will meet in just a moment. Okay, we'll just a moment. When we do something, not our intention, but we know it will happen. And here comes an example that Shulchan Aruch brings. It happens to us many times in Sukkot. It happens many times when we sit outside. Can we wash the hands over the grass? Okay, or over the seeds? When you wash the hands, what's our intention? Our intention is to wash the hands. None of us, or many times, we don't even think about watering the plants, right? Our intention is to wash the hands. But we know for 100%, okay, that when we wash the hands over the grass, obviously it's watering the grass, right? That's the nature, right? You can't wash your hands over grass and say, I didn't have the grass didn't grow, right? That's the
Psik no? Psik
exactly. That's called psik. That's called psik. Shulchan Aruch. When people who eat outside in the gardens, okay, or outside in the yard, so they shouldn't wash their hands above the weeds because it's watering them. And even if they don't have intention for it, it's called psik, exactly, Danny, and therefore you forbidden. Says the Shulchan Aruch, and that's an interesting halacha, that you can pour on plants things that do not cause them to grow. Okay, and the Mishnah Berurah here brings something like strong wine. I never tried it, but could be that strong wine doesn't really cause the plants to grow because it's so strong. Something which is acidic maybe doesn't cause the plants to grow. So that there's no problem on pouring on the plants. It doesn't kill them, but it also doesn't give them water. Okay, so that's the Shulchan Aruch. The Magen Avraham says, don't pour anything. Do not pour anything on the plants, but if you need to, so you can pour wine or other things on the plants if you know it doesn't cause them to grow. Okay, so what's exactly the equivalent to us today? I'm not sure exactly. Maybe soapy water. Okay, maybe if I'm washing, I'm wiping the table and I want to have soapy water, maybe that's something which doesn't help them to grow. But lechatchila, we shouldn't do it at all. Okay, but if we need to, so maybe that could be something which is fine. Therefore, says Shulchan Aruch, if you eating in the garden, don't eat in the garden because it's so natural. Almost we'll be pouring water on the plants. Okay, but okay, now we are getting to the watermelon season. Okay, now I'm not sure if I told you that once a joke, but it's a nice joke. There's an Arab guy, a farmer, who people see him doing like this. Okay, I ask him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm planting plants. I'm putting seeds. I'm sowing the ground. I'm throwing seeds into the ground." So they're asking him, "But your hands are empty. You have nothing inside your hands." So those, well, I'm planting a seedless watermelon, right? So today watermelons are seedless. When we were a bit younger, so watermelons came with seeds, right? And one of the maybe fun games we had with watermelon seeds is spitting the seeds out, having a contest of who can get the seeds to the furthest distance. Maybe we had even fights with watermelon seeds. Each one on his own childhood of what he did with watermelon seeds. So says the Shulchan Aruch, you should be careful not to throw seeds in a place where it will rain. Okay, in a place where it will rain. But if you throw it where animals can eat it in the close future, like in a day or two, so that's fine. Or if you throw the seeds where people all the time walk, so also that's fine because it won't grow. Okay, so if let's say I know that there's a path in the backyard and everyone walks there, I can spit my watermelon seeds to there because then I know they will not grow. But I shouldn't throw seeds to a place where there's a chance that they will grow. And that's halacha today. Maybe it's a bit easier to keep it from a simple reason that today watermelons don't have seeds in them. So we don't have any reason to throw them out. Okay, so since we talked about planting seeds and picking seeds, the Shulchan Aruch moved to picking from a pot. And it's a question which I wasn't asked many times, but a few times people ask me, can one pick on Shabbat from a pot that is not connected to the ground? Okay, sometimes we view as picking something which is, or harvesting, something which is connected to the ground. But the melacha of tolesh, okay, which means disconnecting a plant from where it grows, even if it's from a pot, even if it's from the soil, even if the pot doesn't have any connection to the soil, even if it's standing on a piece of plastic, so we shouldn't pick on Shabbat. And more than that, even if we have a pot that is standing on the ground, on the soil, you shouldn't lift it up and place it on something, hang it on something, because when it's on the soil, it still gets a bit of moisture from the soil. Okay, so you shouldn't lift it from the soil or bring it down to the soil because you are causing some kind of a disconnection between the pot and the soil in the ground. Okay. Two more halachot before I guess some people need to go to our feet, so we'll try to finish earlier. Two more halachot. Can we smell plants on Shabbat? Okay, can we smell plants on Shabbat? And this actually connects us to the first halacha we discussed, and that is climbing on a tree on Shabbat. And Chazal said like that. Something which there's a chance that you will pick because of smelling it, you shouldn't smell on Shabbat. Something that you will not pick, so it's a normal way of smelling it is when it's connected, you can smell on Shabbat. Or if you want to bring it into practice, practical thing, anything which is edible. You have your etrog, you have those that people used to eat etrog. You have an apple, you have this nice looking apple which has a nice smell of an apple tree. You want to smell it on Shabbat, Chazal said don't smell it. You'll smell the apple, the next step will be, I'm picking the apple and taking a bite on the apple. So anything which is edible, we shouldn't smell on Shabbat when it's connected to the tree. But something which is not edible, for example, like hadas, like a jasmine we have in the neighborhood, or other geranium, we have geraniums in the neighborhood, which have a great smell. And people can just go by and smell it. So that, since it's not such a concern that smelling the plant will cause us to pick it, that we can smell on Shabbat, and we can say a bracha of atzei b'samim, misveh b'samim, depending what it is. Okay, so that's quite a common halacha. Another very common halacha is putting plants in a vase on Shabbat. Okay, so putting plants in a vase on Shabbat, says the Shulchan Aruch, it distinguishes between two cases. If it has if it has flowers, okay, if it has flowers that will open because of being placed in the water, that's a problem. You can buy, many times I bought flowers for Shabbat, and the flowers are closed. And I asked the guy, were the flowers open? He said to me, for sure, put the flowers in water and they'll bloom or they'll open in a day or two. That you can't put in water on Shabbat because putting it in water causes it to open on Shabbat. If it's just branches which putting them in water won't cause it to grow or just preserve it maybe and keep it green for a bit longer, that you can put in water on Shabbat. For example, hadas. Okay, hadas. Many people like to have hadassim in the house for Shabbat, and if it doesn't have any flowers, so the water doesn't cause it to grow. You can put it in the water on Shabbat. And one more halacha before we finish. We said that we can't climb on a tree on Shabbat. And we asked, what about a hammock? Or what about a ladder? And the halacha here differentiates between what we call tzedadim and what we call tzidei tzedadim, which means we can't climb a tree on Shabbat, as we understood. We can't also use something which is leaning on a tree or connected to a tree. Okay, so if I have a rope connected to a tree on Shabbat, I can't climb on the rope on Shabbat. That's called tzedadim. But if the rope is connected to something else, which that is connected to the tree, it's so distant, so that already will cause you to remember, 1 second, I'll climb on the tree on Shabbat, that's fine. So if I have a hammock, which the hammock itself is tied to the tree, that's a problem. I can't use the hammock on Shabbat. But if the hammock is tied to a piece of a screw, and the screw is screwed inside a tree, so the screw is tzedadim, okay, that's connected to the tree. Then we have something which is connected to the connection. That's called tzidei tzedadim, and that can be used on Shabbat. So if you have a hammock at home, and you want to use it on Shabbat, don't connect the hammock straight to the tree. Put a screw or a bolt or something inside the tree, and then tie the hammock to that, and then you can use it on Shabbat. And one more halacha, and that will conclude. We can't use a tree on Shabbat. We can't climb on a tree on Shabbat. You can touch a tree on Shabbat. If you aren't moving the tree, you can do it on Shabbat. There's no concern that maybe you'll. We will conclude here. And so we learned a bit about using trees on Shabbat. We learned a few important concepts of Shabbat, like Tzikreisha and Omitkaven. Other things, and B'ezrat Hashem, may we have a great night and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Wend.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.